Sean Higgins. Mysterious scenarios occur frequently, but something about them taking place in a familiar setting is not only mysterious, but also disturbing. Identical to the story of Sean Higgins, a 41-year-old man living in Coos Bay, Oregon, with his wife and children. On Friday, October 14, 2016, Sean, his 21-year-old son Trevor, and his brother went hunting in the Shasta Costa drainage near Bear Camp. Sean and Trevor dropped off Trevor's uncle in another region of the woods before driving to where they were supposed to meet later that day and parking their truck. Sean knew the area well and was confident that the trip into the woods would be quick, so he opted not to bring his backpack, which contained a GPS, with him. The two parties, Trevor and his father, parted ways, expecting to reunite later and pick up their uncle, who had been dropped off earlier. After a few hours, Trevor arrived at the meeting point and waited for his father. Eventually, his uncle arrived at the agreed-upon meeting point. They waited for a while, thinking that something had gone wrong because Sean would not normally spend so much time hunting. They decided to split up and look for him. When Trevor's uncle returned to the truck without Sean, hoping to find him waiting for the both of them, he discovered that not only Sean was missing, but Trevor as well. Trevor's uncle contacted the Curry County Sheriff's Office. Stephanie, Sean's wife, learned early that morning that both her husband and son were missing, and she was stunned. That Saturday, search and rescue teams from several counties across the state joined the Curry County Search and Rescue Team in scouring the harsh terrain in bad weather in search of two men. The search ended after dark, with no sign of them. This continued for 4 days before Trevor was discovered about 2.5 miles from where he entered the woods to look for his father. Apparently, what happened was that as Trevor went into the dense forest that night in search of his father, it became extremely dark, and instead of risking going deeper into the forest, he decided to stay where he was and build a shelter. The next day, he got lost and had to wait for search and rescue to find him. He was found 4 days later, suffering from severe hypothermia caused by his prolonged exposure to the cold, wet weather. The United States Coast Guard airlifted him. The Coast Guard made its way to Bay Area Hospital. Nonetheless, he desired to know if his father had been located, but there was no good news. The search for Sean continued with several search and rescue personnel, as well as canines, drones, helicopters, and a large number of volunteers. Despite the bad weather, hundreds of people turned out to support the vigorous search for Sean. 9 days later, on Sean's 42nd birthday, October 23rd, the search party began to disperse. Sean's friends and co-workers continued to search, but on October 25, 2016, the Sheriff's Department suspended the search because in the 11 days since Sean had vanished, search teams had found no trace of him and were no closer to knowing his whereabouts. With so much time passing, the odds were against his survival. Despite the announcement, Sean's sister Tara Fisher refused to give up. Smaller search parties have been looking for Sean over the years, and conspiracy theories about what happened to him have spread, ranging from drug cartels to Bigfoot. Some believe Sean fell into a treacherous ravine that search teams were unable to reach, while others believe he is no longer in the woods. Sean's case remains open as missing, and the Curry County Sheriff's Office is still seeking answers.
The Colorado mountains stood in stark contrast to the familiar landscapes of Muldrow, Oklahoma, where Alvy Webb, an 86-year-old former principal and teacher, embarked on his annual elk hunting trip. It was the morning of October 19, 2019, when Alvy had set out on an exciting hunt. As the sun began to cast long shadows over the rugged terrain, Alvy set out on a solo elk hunt near the Divide Road Roaring Fork area of the San Juan National Forest. His family, well acquainted with the custom, left him alone on a familiar trail, expecting to reunite at the bottom of the hill around 10 a.m. Little did they know that this would be the last time they saw Alvy. When the hunting party returned as planned, anticipation turned to bewilderment. Alvy, with his sharp mind and love for the outdoors, was nowhere to be found. The family retraced his steps, desperate for any clue that might lead them to the missing patriarch. Yet there was no trace, no boot print, no sign of struggle, just an eerie void where Alvy had stood hours earlier. The ordeal set off a massive search effort, drawing upon the resources of rescue teams, bloodhounds, Black Hawk helicopters, and the relentless determination of family members. The mountainous terrain, with temperatures plummeting to the teens, added urgency to the mission. 5 days of relentless searching yielded no results, and the official search was reluctantly called off. Alvy's mysterious disappearance left everyone involved perplexed. How could a man of his age and familiarity with the surroundings vanish without a trace? No signs of distress, no communication from his cell phone. The void seemed to devour all leads. The family, friends, and authorities grappled with questions that echoed through the silent wilderness. Some eerie similarities emerged between Alvy Webb's vanishing act and other hunters who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Was it the unforgiving environment that claimed him? Or did something more sinister unfold in the shadows of the Colorado mountains? The desperation of Alvy's family was shown through news reports, interviews, and heartfelt pleas. His granddaughter, Macy Spaulding, summed it up as a nightmare, a sentiment shared by those who knew the affable hunter. The annual hunting trip had transformed into a harrowing tale, leaving everyone clinging to hope and praying for a miracle. As the events unfolded, the search for Alvy Webb continued, shrouding the Colorado wilderness in a veil of mystery. The additional information painted a portrait of a man whose sharp mind defied his age, a man who undertook the yearly hunting ritual with enthusiasm and a keen sense of direction. The extensive search efforts, both on the ground and from the air, painted a picture of frustration and disbelief. Despite thorough searches covering large areas with meticulous precision, Alvy remained elusive. The helicopter sweeps, the infrared drones piercing the night sky, and the grid-patterned ground searches all yielded no sign of the missing hunter. The perplexity deepened as details of Alvy's last known location emerged: a trail near Divide Road, a meadow where he had hunted before, and the Roaring Fork Road, all familiar landmarks, now bore the weight of an unsolved mystery. The chilling gunshot heard by the hunting party added another layer of complexity, raising more questions than answers. Sheriff Steve Nolan, at the helm of the search, voiced his frustration, stating, "We looked all over, but there was no sign of him, no clues." The lack of evidence and the absence of any indication of Alvy's presence fueled speculation. Did he fall victim to the elements, or did something more nefarious occur in the heart of the wilderness? Despite the efforts of everyone to find even just a single trace of him, they found nothing.
Chances are, if you're 82 years old, your doctors are probably going to advise you not to go hunting. Your body is not what it used to be, and trekking through the woods for miles would only do you more damage. But 82-year-old Thomas Messick Sr. wasn't one to take such advice. Despite his old age, this ex-paratrooper wasn't ready to give up hunting. He'd been hunting with his old friends, all seasoned veterans like him, for over 55 years. So when they invited him on their annual trip, he was all in, even though he had just recovered from a bout of shingles. On November 15, 2015, he and his group of friends set out on another hunting adventure in the woods south of Brant Lake in New York. This spot was legendary for hunters and fishermen, even attracting big names like former President Teddy Roosevelt back in the day. With Messick and his group of friends' wealth of experience, it's safe to assume that they were confident about having a successful hunt, spiced with some fun. Arriving at their chosen location, they devised a two-part plan to catch the prey. It was quite a simple plan. Messick would hold position, while the others flushed out deer towards him, making them easier targets. He would then pick them off as much as he could. As time passed, Messick's friends arrived at where he was supposed to be and noticed something strange. He was gone. There was no sign of him, his rifle, or even his walkie-talkie. Did he bag some trophies and head back early? Nope, not a single deer was in sight either. Worried, his friends started searching for him. After a while, they had to call in the forest rangers for help, as Messick was yet to return, even after the agreed-upon time. The search continued, but soon it was dark, and they could no longer go deeper into the woods. Even at this point, Messick's friends knew they couldn't all just return home. Half the group stayed, fired their rifles, and honked the car horns to attract him to the area where they were camped. The remaining men left to inform his family and the authorities about the situation. Despite everyone hoping that Messick would return, there was no sign of him all night. By morning, a team of 13 trained search and rescue personnel from the Park Service were on the case. Unfortunately, their search came up empty too. Over the next few weeks, the search exploded. Over 300 people, from volunteers to law enforcement, joined in. They used everything they had, dogs, helicopters, the whole works, but Messick vanished without a trace. At some point, the FBI joined in on the case. Their arrival offered a glimmer of hope, but it wasn't meant to be. No leads surfaced and the mystery only deepened. Soon it was clear that the investigation had hit a dead end, and slowly everyone began to accept that Messick was gone for good. The only comfort in this tragedy was the lack of evidence suggesting foul play, but that didn't stop theories from swirling. One in particular focused on Messick's health issues. He had a history of heart trouble, not to mention poor vision and hearing. Combine that with his age, and some folks believed he might have stumbled into a hidden cave or crevice and gotten hurt, unable to call for help. To honor Messick's memory and offer some closure to his family, a memorial gravesite was established, which can still be visited today. Alvy Webb. It was an unusual and baffling situation that left everyone puzzled. Alvy Webb, an 86-year-old former teacher and principal from Muldrow, Oklahoma, was known for his active lifestyle and love for hunting, which didn't diminish with age. Contrary to what one might expect of someone his age, Alvy remained mentally sharp and physically active. He enjoyed hunting, especially around the holidays when most of his friends and family would accompany him. Elk hunting in particular was something he never missed. The adventure of hiking, camping, and hunting elk released dopamine, which he couldn't hate. Every year during the elk hunting season, Alvy went out on elk hunting trips with his son, grandson, and other men. This was typically around October in Oklahoma. They would camp near Route 564A. They knew the area well, especially since they'd been hunting elk there for 5 years. Mr. Webb eagerly anticipated the elk hunting season and the tradition of elk hunting with his family and friends each year. On October 19, 2019, Alvy, dressed in an orange stocking cap and a hunter's vest over a heavy camouflage jacket, set off to hunting. His family led him to the location, 100 yards down a trail near a meadow where he had hunted the previous year. The west area of the Colorado Trail was rugged and mountainous. Mountains that stretch for long distances and have relatively high peaks. The mountains were manageable enough for Alvy to hike. With summer drawing to a close, he was hoping to find some elk. He was very familiar with the setting and had a handful of food bars and water to get him through the day. They agreed to pick him up at the bottom of the hill on the road around 10 a.m., leaving him alone. He was left on the lonely trail with only a few people passing by. You could occasionally hear a car zooming by and the birds bickering. Even in the season, the surrounding trees were towering, but weren't particularly evergreen. It was the sort of place where people would harvest firewood for camping, or in this case, to hunt elk. When the hunting party members returned to check on him several hours later, they couldn't find him. It was strange and unsettling, because where could an elderly veteran like him have wandered? They looked for him where they left him and where they said they would find him, but there was no trace. Had he gone back? Was he lost somewhere? These were the questions they asked each other. The hunters didn't wait to find out, instead contacting authorities around 4 p.m. to report Mr. Webb missing. A more extensive search party was organized, and another mission began around 5 p.m., but still he was not found. On Friday, October 18th, Alvy's cell phone battery died, and the authorities' attempts to pick up a signal were unsuccessful. Steve Nolan, the Montezuma County Sheriff, and his rescue team, a canine search and rescue team, and Mr. Webb's friends and family conducted an on-the-ground search of the area, 30 yards at a time, but nothing was found, no clues of any kind. just scattered features of the serene, elevated natural setting, and no sign of Mr. Webb. By 9 a.m. on Monday, while 25 searchers were scouring the area, someone reported hearing a muffled gunshot. When it was checked, there was no evidence of any dead animals. The search was eventually called off, but Sheriff Steve Nolan stated they would continue if any clues were provided. Alvy's family and friends continued to search the area for a while, but eventually stopped. After this, the temperature of the area wasn't the only thing that dropped. People who lived there were also caught in grief and constantly wore puzzled looks because of Mr. Webb's unknown whereabouts. It's still unclear where the 86-year-old man, who struggled to walk at his age, went. He wasn't disabled and was mentally alert, so it was strange that he wandered away. He just disappeared. Mr. Webb's disappearance terrified and shocked the people of Muldrow, and for a long time, people were afraid to hike, let alone go elk hunting. There were even a few rumors about what happened to Mr. Webb, from being eaten by animals to most likely falling into a deep ditch, to being consumed by wildfire, to possibly becoming unconscious due to the mountain's hypoxic conditions and falling into something, none of which provided accurate answers to what must have happened to him. Mr. Webb is still missing to this day, and it doesn't seem like he'll ever be found.
Jeremy Ivan Childress, or better known by family and friends as Jeremy, was a loving 31-year-old husband from Oregon to his beautiful wife Kristen and his 2 children, which includes a 3-year-old daughter and an 8-month-old son. He was an avid outdoorsman and hunter, and has been frequently going out to a particular section of the Tillamook State Forest in Tillamook County to hunt and explore nature. He was often described by his family, friends, and peers as an experienced hunter, especially by his hunting partner, Shane Louie. Jeremy and Shane were often seen going to hunting trips together, particularly on that one spot in the Tillamook State Forest where Jeremy knows every nook and cranny. The two would always come home successful and full of new experiences to cherish and share with their families and loved ones. On October 15, 2004, Jeremy and Shane planned another trip together to the same spot where they would usually hunt, the Tillamook State Forest. Grabbing their rifles and other useful items, they set out for the hunt. This time, Shane decided to bring his 12-year-old son, Shane Jr., so the child could experience what a real hunt was like and to teach him the basics of hunting. Jeremy was glad that Shane was able to bring Shane Jr. with them, as he was eager to share all his hunting prowess with his friend's son. As the 3 arrived at their usual spot, Jeremy and Shane began to set up a camp for them to rest and plan the rest of their hunting trip ahead. Shane Jr. eagerly watches as the 2 seem to be so skilled in what they do. After setting up their camp, the 3 decided to rest and wish the best for the next few days of their hunt. It was October 16, 2004, exactly a day after they arrived, when they decided to hunt together. Jeremy, Shane, and Shane Jr. navigated the forest smoothly, and they arrived at the usual spot where Jeremy and Shane would hunt. It was another successful hunt, and it was time for them to go back to their camp. However, there was one problem. They seemed to have lost their way back. Shane Jr. was terrified when he realized that they were lost, but Jeremy assured them that he knows the way back, and he wants to search the area himself, giving Shane and Shane Jr. a promise that he will come back with knowledge on where their camp is. And there, exactly at 4:30 p.m., was the last time that Jeremy would be seen alive. A few hours after Jeremy had set out by himself to search for the camp, Shane and Shane Jr. decided to find their way back themselves, as they thought that Jeremy had already reached it and just forgot to go back to them. However, when the father and son had successfully reached the camp and found no trace of Jeremy there, that's when they knew that something was wrong, that Jeremy was missing. October 17, 2004 marked the official declaration of Jeremy Ivan Childress as a missing person. The forest, once a haven for his adventures, now held the secret to his disappearance. An exhaustive search yielded no clues or traces of the experienced hunter, who knew every inch of the Tillamook State Forest. 11 days turned into weeks, months, and eventually 19 long years. Jeremy's fate remained a haunting mystery, with his family trapped in a perpetual state of uncertainty. As the 10th anniversary of his disappearance approached, his mother, Becky Grimes, clung to hope, haunted by the enigmatic circumstances surrounding her son's vanishing act. In the backdrop of towering trees, Becky tirelessly placed flyers, tended to a small memorial, and refused to let the case fade into obscurity. The forest, once a playground for adventure, now echoed with the unanswered questions of a grieving mother. The details of Jeremy's disappearance, etched in the missing hunter alert, spoke of a man with a love for risk-taking adventures and the outdoors. A loving father and husband, he left behind a family grappling with the void he left in their lives. The dense vegetation of the Tillamook State Forest became a canvas for unanswered questions, a labyrinth of uncertainty where an experienced hunter disappeared without a trace. Becky Grimes, with tearful eyes, spoke of her enduring hope, a beacon in the darkness, that one day the mystery would unravel and Jeremy would be found.
On October 5, 2013, 74-year-old Barnett Zeldin and his wife went out to have a fancy dinner of coconut shrimp and tilapia at the Chart House in Atlantic City's Golden Nugget Casino. It was their wedding anniversary, and since they had been married for 50 years, it was only right that they toast to the years ahead together. Unfortunately, the couple never got to share another anniversary together. Just 2 days after their lovely celebration, Zeldin vanished without a trace. On the morning of that day, Zeldin informed his wife that he was heading for Wharton Forest Park in Washington Township, Burlington County, New Jersey. His plan was to set up his tree stand for the upcoming deer hunting season. He even stopped by the Audubon Gun Club in Woodland to sign in before going into the woods for his mission. Typically, he should have been back at the club that same night, but nobody saw him return. Now, Zeldin's wife tried calling him that night, but it went straight to voicemail. At first, she wasn't too worried. Zeldin wasn't exactly known for checking in on the first day. Plus, he was a seasoned hunter of different kinds of prey. In his home, there were several hunting trophies that showed how good he is, including a stuffed 900-pound grizzly bear he killed in Alaska. All things considered, she probably felt Zeldin just got too comfy in his tree stand and forgot his phone. After all, with all those hunting trophies under his belt, Zeldin knew what he was doing out there. He'd be back safe and sound, no doubt. But by the second day, when her call still went to voicemail, a knot started to form in her stomach. This wasn't like Zeldin. He wouldn't just disappear for days on a hunting trip, not without letting her know. By the third day, that knot had turned into full-blown worry. Knowing something was terribly wrong, Zeldin's wife drove down to the Audubon Gun Club on the fourth day. There, her worst fear was confirmed. Zeldin hadn't come back. Without wasting another minute, they threw together a search party and alerted the authorities. Soon, the New Jersey State Police and Park Police joined forces, throwing everything they had at the search. Canine units and helicopters scoured the vast wilderness of Wharton Forest, a massive 617-acre area. It wasn't long before they found Zeldin's truck, a dusty 1992 Chevy Blazer, parked near his usual hunting spot. However, the details were unsettling. The car keys were still in the ignition, something you only do if you're planning on being right back. Inside, they found his phone, wallet, and even his trusty dog, who went everywhere with him. There was even bait, corn and molasses, untouched in the truck. The windows were also down, which both explained how the dog might have survived, but it also painted a chilling picture. With the truck as the lead, the search team held on to hope. Maybe Zeldin was just disoriented somewhere nearby, maybe even injured. But then came another blow. They found out Zeldin had type 2 diabetes and a history of strokes. Without his medication, surviving out there for days looked grim. The search continued, now not just for a living Zeldin, but for any sign of him at all. Despite the exhaustive efforts of law enforcement agents, they hit a dead end in their search for Zeldin, prompting them to call off the search. However, undeterred by this setback, Zeldin's family, friends, and neighbors took matters into their own hands, conducting daily searches. They plastered signs in the area featuring Zeldin's photo and rallied volunteers to go door to door, questioning residents about any sightings or information that could shed light on his disappearance. As a last desperate move, Zeldin's family even brought in psychic Barbara Mackey from Toms River to help out. The psychic had a hunch about where Barnett might be. She pinpointed an area 5 miles northwest of his vehicle, which triggered a new set of searches for Zeldin's family. However, like the previous instances, this also yielded nothing. His disappearance is still a total mystery, and folks in the wilderness and hunting circles still talk about it. Trevor Basil. Forging strong connections isn't just about bonding with family and friends. It's about weaving ties within your community, a powerful yet often underestimated tool for personal growth. Trevor Basil's journey vividly illustrates the impact of such bonds. All accounts have been very similar, with the highlights being individual disappearances and unique characteristics. However, the reactions differed slightly. The community's reaction to this story is definitely worth it. On Friday, August 14, 2020, Trevor Basil left his home in Panaca, Nevada, causing concern. Trevor was an art teacher, husband, father, and well-known community member. As strange as it sounds, rock hunting was common in this area, and he had a long-standing passion for it. He had done it several times before, sometimes staying out late at night. One particular day, Mr. Basil went rock hunting in the hills. The summer air and sunshine made it an ideal day for rock hunting, a day that seasoned enthusiasts rarely missed. But on this specific day, things didn't go as expected, as he never returned. When he didn't come home that night, his family conducted a search and found his vehicle in the hills near Miller Wash, north of Panaca, but there was no sign of Mr. Basil. He was definitely missing. When the sheriff learned of his disappearance, he did not have enough officers to handle the search because many of his rescue personnel were out of the area at the time. He decided to issue a call for volunteers to be recruited for the search. The next day, more than 100 volunteers gathered outside the Panaca market and set out to look for signs of Basil. Basil was tracked 7 miles throughout the area, and after hours of searching, they discovered a bucket full of rock, which they assumed Basil had collected along with a towel. Despite this finding, he was not found that day. On the second day of the search, a grid search was performed in the area surrounding the bucket. Basil's family directed the volunteers where to go while flying drones in the sky. The search was carried out using various vehicles, including horses, ATVs, and dirt bikes. By the end of the second day, the area had been thoroughly searched, and even the search dogs could not detect Basil's scent. The next day, the Nevada Department of Forestry assisted with the investigation by dispatching a crew to aid in the search. This time, the search was conducted closer to Basil's vehicle in hopes that he had gotten lost on his way to it. After more than 12 hours of scouring the area's mountains and ditches, the day ended. The efforts of the Basil family, his friend Sean Frenner, and local organizations were highly praised. The volunteer turnout was hailed as one of the largest ever seen in Lincoln County. A Facebook page was created to help organize and inform the community about the search for Trevor Basil. This Facebook page is full of beautiful messages from well-wishers. A few businesses nationwide participated in the search, and a local food truck provided free food for the search teams. Sean Frenner also posted on her page that 5 cadaver dog teams would search the area later, but they were still unable to locate him. Basil's wife was highly grateful for the time and effort put into her cause. The community effort, as well as their prayers and heartfelt wishes, were enough to inspire Mr. Basil's family to persevere in their search for him.
In the vast Australian outback, where the sun painted the land with shades of orange and shadows played hide-and-seek, there unfolded a mysterious tale of a young man named Jeremiah J.O. Rivers. It all began with a pig hunting trip, not your ordinary adventure, but one laced with secrets and shadows. Picture J.O., a 27-year-old indigenous man from the East Kimberley, setting out with a group of 7 companions. This journey, starting from Balranald, New South Wales, wasn't just about hunting pigs. There was a hidden agenda, the transport of cannabis to sell in faraway communities. As the convoy rolled through the dusty trails, the air filled with the scent of adventure and the distinct aroma of cannabis. The group, fueled by the drugs they carried, found themselves in a haze of excitement. However, J.O. seemed to be affected more than the others. Hallucinations danced in his eyes, and he spoke of a longing to swim in waters clearer than those around him. The desert, a vast and mysterious canvas, became the setting for a story that went beyond the ordinary. Weepo Creek near Nokundra became the stage where J.O.'s reality faded into shadows. His kinship brother, Joe Cantilla Gaydon, witnessed the unfolding events. In his intoxicated state, J.O. expressed a desire to find clearer waters. As night fell, J.O. wandered off into the unknown, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty. Fear gripped the group, preventing them from reaching out to authorities due to harsh conditions and the fear of legal consequences. It wasn't until the next day that the authorities were alerted, delayed by the shadows of legality and fear. The search, a desperate attempt to unravel the mystery, unfolded with land, air, and water efforts. However, the unforgiving landscape held its secrets tightly, revealing no trace of J.O., his clothing, or signs of foul play. The inquest into his disappearance was marked by allegations of confrontation between J.O. and Joe Cantilla Gaydon, adding layers of complexity to an already enigmatic story. Days turned into nights and hope dwindled in the vastness of the outback. The family, devastated by the lack of closure, resorted to unconventional means in their quest for answers. International scammers preyed on their vulnerability, falsely claiming a kidnapping for ransom. A psychic medium offered glimpses into the ethereal, but substantive leads remained elusive. As the inquest unfolded in Brisbane, witnesses, including the men from the ill-fated journey and involved police officers, shed light on the mysterious vanishing of J.O. Rivers. The proceedings, a journey into the heart of darkness, aimed to unravel the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. Allegations of cannabis trafficking and violations of COVID-19 restrictions painted a vivid backdrop to a story that transcended the boundaries of a mere hunting trip. The narrative, entwined with elements of mystery, unfolded against the backdrop of an Indigenous man's disappearance in the harsh embrace of the Australian outback. Balloons released into the East Kimberley sky marked the anniversaries, a reminder of a void left behind. The outpouring of grief extended beyond the physical boundaries, with friends and family pleading for answers that eluded them. The inquest, a beacon of hope for closure, delved into the heartache that resonated through Warman and the wider East Kimberley region. The truth, elusive as ever, remained hidden beneath layers of conflicting accounts and unanswered questions. The 5-day inquiry sought justice, not just for J.O. Rivers, but for the community bound by sorrow and uncertainty. Even to this day, the search for J.O. continued, but not even a sign of him has been seen ever since.
On a Friday morning back in November 2013, Eric Smith from Cedar Bluff, Virginia, headed out around 10 a.m. from his home. He had in mind to visit his rural land for some hunting, taking some time off from his stressful job as the general foreman of the Buchanan No. 1 mine. Before leaving, he told his wife of his plan, just as she was preparing to go to his mother's place in Buchanan County for the day with one of their daughters. All things considered, they were going to meet back at home later that day. However, when Smith's wife returned, the house was empty, the same way she left it. Smith's wife felt that he'd be back soon, maybe a little tired from not feeling well all week. But as the sun began to set and he still wasn't home, worry started to creep in. It wasn't like he was planning a whole camping trip. He didn't even take his phone, meaning there was no way to call and check in. The more time passed, the worse the feeling got in her gut. Finally, she couldn't wait any longer. She decided to head back to her mother-in-law's place, who by chance was at a church service nearby that night. Upon hearing about Smith's disappearance, Smith's mother joined his wife and other family members to race straight to Smith's land to begin a search for him. Even though it wasn't too cold earlier, maybe in the 50s, things were starting to get chilly fast as night fell. At this moment, Smith's wife knew she had to take further action. She called the police and reported her husband missing. The police also didn't waste any time. Officers, firefighters, and everyone who could lend a hand were out searching the area around Smith's property that night. But it was like looking for a needle in a haystack since the woods were so thick. To help matters, the state police helicopter with night vision was brought in. However, it turned up nothing significant when it canvassed the area. The next day, the search kicked back into high gear. The law enforcement officers brought in sniffer dogs, hoping to catch a scent of Eric. The dogs picked up a few trails leading away from his house, but frustratingly, none of them went anywhere. One trail even seemed to loop back around, but was ruled out as being a few days old. Since Eric had his muzzle loader with him, and it could be loaded, they decided to play it safe and brought in dogs trained to sniff out explosives. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out either. By Sunday, it had become a full-blown search for Smith. Around 60 people were combing the woods. Trained search and rescue crews, Smith's buddies from work, and even neighbors all pitched in. But with every passing hour, hope started to dwindle, and to make things even tougher, Smith was wearing some top-notch camo that practically hid him in the trees. It felt like they were searching for a ghost. The search went on for a while, but eventually they had to call it off when no real clues were uncovered. Smith's family even offered a big reward of $20,000 for any information that could help find Smith. Sadly, nothing was found or reported. Smith's disappearance hit his family the hardest, of course, but his co-workers were wrecked too. According to reports, no one had any bad words to say, as he got along well with everyone. Even the most cheerful and charismatic people can face tragic events, despite the hope that their positive nature might protect them. The Pine Barrens of New Jersey changed forever after a particular incident, losing its unique charm, despite being home to hunters. Barry Zeldin's disappearance remains unsolved. Barry, a 74-year-old man who lived in rural New Jersey, was nothing more than a reflection of his surroundings. Something about the serenity and calmness made him adore his home. Given that his house was surrounded by thickets of forest, which he didn't mind, it's no surprise that he was a hunter. In fact, the hunting did not bring him to New Jersey. Instead, moving to this area after retirement kindled his enjoyment of game hunting. On Monday, October 7, 2013, Mr. Zeldin had taken a walk away from his home that day after informing his wife about his planned hunting expedition, which involved placing bait at a deer stand near Chatsworth. It sounded simple compared to his previous exploits, but the feedback was shocking because he never returned, and there was not a clue whatsoever. Mrs. Zeldin wasn't worried when her husband didn't return home or call her on Monday night, because he was known to go on spontaneous hunting trips that could last several days. However, on Tuesday and Wednesday, she called him at regular intervals, but all of her calls went to voicemail. On Thursday, she attempted to drive to the Audubon Gun Club, where her husband and other hunters who were members were always expected to sign in so that other hunters knew who was out there, but she was unable to find the club. Thankfully, she found the club on Friday, a bungalow in the middle of the woods, and discovered that her husband had signed in at 9:55 a.m. Monday morning. Her worry grew. She had a couple of members go out in search of Barry that Friday night, but they couldn't find anything. On Saturday, Wilbur Swales, president of the gun club, and 3 other members discovered his 1992 Chevy Blazer SUV. The windows were open, his keys were in the ignition, his phone was on the dashboard, and his dog Taffy was inside, but Mr. Zeldin was not present. Mrs. Zeldin hoped Taffy was still alive, fueling herself with hope that her husband hadn't left her in a long time and would likely return soon. Still, a part of her knew that their dog was alive because she most likely ate the corn and molasses for the deer and must have drank rainwater since the windows were open. The New Jersey State Police and State Park Police were alerted, and they searched for the missing hunter employing canines and helicopters. The search was called off on Sunday afternoon, considering there was no sign of Zeldin. On Tuesday, volunteers from Burlington County Canine Search and Rescue attempted but failed to locate victims of any kind. Mrs. Zeldin was gravely worried and increasingly saddened. She didn't want to think that her husband was dead because he was outstanding in the woods and very independent. But when she remembered that he had type 2 diabetes and had multiple strokes in the past, and he didn't have his medication with him, plus he loved his dog Taffy so much that he wouldn't leave her alone, she couldn't help but wonder if something had indeed gone terribly wrong. It was difficult to believe that 2 days before he left, they celebrated their 50th anniversary with a delicious dinner of coconut shrimp and tilapia at the Chart House in Atlantic City's Nugget Casino. Now she was alone, uncertain of where her husband was. As unbelievable as it may seem, Mr. Zeldin's disappearance was a reality. It was surprising, given how smoothly Zeldin evolved as he hunted in the woods more and more, as formidable as the legendary Jim Corbett or even Fred Bear, with keen eyes honed by years of experience, scanning the underbrush with an intensity rivaled only by the predators that lurk within. With each step, he became one with the rhythm of the wilderness, his senses attuned to even the smallest movements, despite his advanced age. But in the end, what really happened? Because he was nowhere to be seen, heard, or found. What happened to Mr. Zeldin is a question we still ask today, as no one knows where he is.
In the dense woods near Brant Lake, New York, an ominous tale unfolded on November 15, 2015. Thomas E. Messick Sr., an 82-year-old ex-paratrooper and seasoned hunter, embarked on a routine hunting trip with friends and family. Clad in camouflage, armed with a rifle, and equipped with a walkie-talkie, Messick joined a group of 7 professional and experienced hunters, just like him, for what should have been an ordinary deer drive. Despite having several health issues, such as a blind eye from a gunpowder accident and being hard of hearing, Messick was still active and eager to participate in different hunting and outdoor activities to spend the rest of his senior years filled with exciting and cherished memories. During his younger years, he has taught firearm and hunting safety, and his son also noted that despite his old age, he was still great and going around well. The plan was straightforward. Messick would serve as the watcher while the others drove deer toward him. The team consisted of quite old and experienced hunters, with 4 of them older than Messick and 3 younger. There, they set out on their exciting hunting journey. As they were navigating the woods, the hunters, even Messick, noticed a strange feeling in the woods. There were fewer animals than usual. Not even a single bird or a squirrel could be seen. The only sound they could hear at that time was a strange, unexplainable sound that echoed through the area all throughout their hunt. As the group reconvened at 3 p.m., a sense of bewilderment crept in. The seasoned hunter, Messick, was nowhere to be found. Despite immediate efforts, including noise-making, distress signals, and calls to forest rangers, Messick seemed to have vanished into thin air. A massive search unfolded, involving hundreds of volunteers, forest rangers, and even FBI agents. The search covered vast areas of the Lake George Wild Forest, but no trace of Messick, his belongings, or any wildlife emerged. The woods, once teeming with life, fell eerily silent. As investigators delved into the mystery, various theories surfaced. Could Messick have fallen into hazardous terrain, or did foul play shroud his disappearance? His age and health conditions made wandering far less likely, intensifying the mystery. Despite exhaustive efforts, the case remained open, with the FBI expressing uncertainty. Witnesses recounted peculiar events on that ill-fated day, unexplained noises and an unnatural silence in the woods. Messick's vanishing act became a chilling mystery, prompting questions about the events that transpired that November day in the Lake George Wild Forest. Was it a tragic accident, foul play, or something more mysterious? The haunting silence of the Adirondack wilderness enveloped the fate of Thomas E. Messick Sr. Diving deeper into Messick's profile added layers to the mystery. His poor hearing, limited vision, and a history of health issues contradicted the possibility of him wandering far. The distinctive details of his camouflage attire, the walkie-talkie, and the rifle fueled the intrigue. His wife of over 50 years attested to his expertise as a hunter, adding a poignant touch to the puzzle. The plot thickened as connections emerged with another disappearance, Fritz Drum, a 68-year-old who went missing within 10 days of Messick. 2 stories with eerie similarities unfolded in the backdrop of the Adirondack wilderness. The disappearance of elderly men, seemingly unlinked yet sharing a mysterious thread, added an element of the unknown. The strangeness deepened, with witnesses recalling an uncanny silence in the woods and reports of an unidentifiable noise. Was it nature's hush or a harbinger of the mysterious events that transpired that day? In the quest for answers, the narrative unfolded further with the recounting of the hunting day. 4 older men stationed as watchers, the younger hunters driving deer in a peculiar silence enveloping the forest. A friend's memory echoed a strange sound, indescribable yet haunting. The pieces of the puzzle didn't quite fit, and the disappearance of Tom Messick lingered, casting a shadow over the Adirondack landscape. The search expanded with forest rangers, volunteers, and even specialized teams, but the wilderness held its secrets. The possibility of foul play lingered, drawing the attention of the FBI, injecting a federal dimension into the local mystery. The unusual involvement raised more questions than answers. Up to this day, Messick, even a single trace of his existence, was never found, and all the possibilities from being suddenly killed by someone or something, abducted, or even more terrifying, such as anything supernatural, were all made more questionable with a single thing: the strange silence and the unidentifiable noise that the hunters, the searchers, and even Messick heard on that very place where he went missing.
Tyler Doyle. The incidents that lead to these disappearances become increasingly shocking, as does the realization that the circumstances surrounding their disappearances are not unusual. Tyler Doyle's story is identical to the previous 2, with the exception that he was much younger. Tyler Doyle was a 23-year-old duck hunter from Loris, South Carolina. He had recently married his wife, who was at the time expecting their child. Duck hunting was common in that part of the country because it was surrounded by water bodies that served as habitats for ducks, and Tyler was no stranger to it, as were his sea maneuvering exploits. The incident occurred on January 26, 2023, while Tyler was duck hunting on a john boat near the Little River Inlet. The river was calm, with only a few intermittent tides. The atmosphere was chilly, and he hoped the ducks were out. The water current was normal, at least compared to others he had encountered. There weren't many boats on the river that day. In fact, he had not seen any yet, which was not unusual. Doyle's boat kept stalling and being pulled by the water of the North Jetties to where the intercoastal waterway meets the Atlantic Ocean in the Little River area. He was duck hunting with his friend, whom he dropped off on the North Jetties, and then motored around to leave duck decoys. He called his friend and explained what was going on. His friend contacted 911, who then notified the Coast Guard. It was a tense scenario, but not particularly disturbing compared to previous occasions. However, fate didn't care, as Doyle was last seen by his friend on the bow of his boat with the tide carrying it out to sea. Tyler Doyle could not be found despite searches by several agencies, including the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, or SCDNR, Horry County Fire Rescue, and Civil Air Patrol on land, in water, and in the air. 5 days after his disappearance, on January 31st, his aunt and others discovered his waders while searching for him off the coast of North Carolina. This discovery gave his family hope because it indicated they were close to his body. Taylor Doyle's missing case was widely discussed on social media, with many people sharing information about what happened. This case received much attention, and people began developing theories about what happened to him. Some speculated that Doyle must have met foul play, but SCDNR lead investigator Ronnie Floyd ruled in a statement written 2 weeks after his disappearance that there was no evidence to suggest that Mr. Doyle met foul play, and that he believes he drowned and remains missing. According to Lakeland's Facebook post, Doyle's wife gave birth to their child Paisley in April. Doyle's family's hearts were lifted momentarily as everyone was pleased. Doyle's family announced in May that he had been added to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. On December 5th, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division was asked to join the case. This has made no difference so far, as Tyler Doyle remains missing. We remain hopeful that he will be found someday. Back on October 21, 2007, some hunters were camping in the Chimney Rock area of western Grand County, Colorado. They stumbled on a weird sight, a rifle leaning all alone against a pickup truck parked along a forest road. They remembered seeing a man around the truck the day before, but now it was just the rifle. This definitely creeped them out enough to call the Department of Wildlife. Later on, officers from the Department of Wildlife, or DOW, pulled up to the scene. They eyed the truck cautiously. It was locked tight and everything seemed normal, except for the rifle laying abandoned on the ground beside it. Figuring it was better safe than sorry, they whipped out their cameras to snap some pictures of the weapon for evidence. Then, they carefully collected the rifle and stashed it securely in their patrol car for safekeeping. Now, they had a bit of a mystery to unravel. Who left the rifle behind and why? Back at their office, the DOW officers ran a check on the truck's license plate, and a name popped up: Dale Banker, a resident of Denver. It turned out Banker had hunting licenses for the area where his truck was parked, and even another hunting area further south. So Banker was a legit hunter in the right place at the right time. But where was he? The days ticked by, and the DOW officers kept an eye on Banker's truck. However, it was all in vain. There was no sign of movement, no fresh tracks in the snow around it. It was like nobody had been near it. Finally, after 5 days of Banker not returning, they decided it was time to call in some backup. They contacted the sheriff's department to let them know about the abandoned truck. Unlike the DOW officers who only searched around the car, the sheriff's deputies took things a step further. They unlocked it and found a whole other scene: another gun, clothes for all kinds of weather, a sleeping bag, and a bunch of other personal things. It looked like Banker was all set up for an extended stay. The mystery deepened 2 days after the initial arrival of the deputies. A search party was launched to find Banker. This included a dozen members of search and rescue, along with their trusty bloodhound companions. They scoured the area around the truck all day, but Banker seemed to have vanished without a trace. This wasn't just a case of a forgotten rifle anymore. Seeing no signs of Banker after the search, the sheriff's department decided to take Banker's truck into custody. Meanwhile, they were determined to track Banker down. They figured his home might hold some clues, so they contacted the Denver Police Department and asked them to check it out. The Denver officers scoured Banker's place, and what did they find? Maps, all marked up with something. Unfortunately, these marked maps seemed more like a dead end than a helpful lead. Further investigation revealed no clues, as Banker did not have family or many friends in Denver. For years, Banker's disappearance remained a cold case up until September 2018. Some human remains were found by hunters in the White Slide area near Carter Mountain, which is relatively close to the Chimney Rock area of western Grand County. Sadly, after a thorough investigation, it turned out to be a different story. The remains weren't connected to Banker, and the puzzle of his disappearance remained unsolved.
A 21-year-old student at Mississippi State from Wesson, and Gunnar Palmer, a 16-year-old from Hazelhurst, were not just avid duck hunters. They were two souls bound by a common love for the outdoors and a passion for supporting wounded warriors through their volunteer work with Jeep Sullivan's Wounded Warrior Outdoor Adventures. It was on a chilly morning, December 3, 2020, that the two friends set out on a hunting trip near the Mississippi River. The air was crisp, and the promise of a wounded warrior hunt the next day fueled their excitement. Riding in their truck with a boat trailer in tow, they headed towards their usual hunting spot in Port Gibson. Gunnar's dog, Ranger, was always present on Zeb and Gunnar's hunting trips, but this time Gunnar decided not to bring the dog for reasons unknown. It was 2 p.m. in the afternoon when Zeb and Gunnar were nearing their usual hunting spot, which was Port Gibson, where they parked their truck to begin with the hunt. As they were pulling into Port Gibson, Zeb took his phone out and made a quick call to his mother, Sharon, saying that they were getting into Latorno Landing before saying goodbye, and his usual "I love you" to his mom. Zeb was a sweet child despite being 21 already, and it shows. With excitement on their faces just like the first time, Zeb and Gunnar went out of the truck with rifles on their hands and carrying everything they needed for the hunt. They were pretty skilled despite being very young, and it really shows just by the way they carry themselves near the water. Even though they've experienced hunting for ducks several times now, they're still mesmerized by nature and was always excited with what they do. There, they rode on the boat trailer they always carried and started their anticipated hunt. At first, the hunt was going so well, with Zeb and Gunnar peacefully navigating the waters and talking about random things. But when the night came, mysteriously, they never came home. Gunnar's father always calls his son whenever he knows that he's coming home from their hunt. Gunnar's dog, Ranger, was also patiently waiting for his beloved owner to arrive home. But he didn't, and this concerned Med the most, even Zeb's parents. The news struck the hearts of their families, particularly their fathers, Med Palmer and Barry Hughes. The search efforts involved local authorities, wildlife agencies, volunteers, and even the U.S. Coast Guard spanned weeks and months. Boats scoured the river's surface, sonar delved into its depths, and aircraft and drones combed the surroundings. Yet the mighty Mississippi held on to its secrets. The fathers, Barry and Med, refused to succumb to despair. As the weeks turned into months, they embarked on a relentless quest for closure, grappling with the pain of not knowing the fate of their sons. The Mississippi River, with its vast stretches and deep currents, became both a symbol of tragedy and a source of solace. National Boat Safety Week brought attention to the importance of boater safety, echoing the pain expressed by Sharon Hughes. She advocated for caution on the waters, emphasizing the need for preparedness to avert heart-wrenching incidents like the one that befell her son and his friend. The one-year anniversary loomed, yet the fathers persisted in their search, exploring riverbanks in the hopes of finding any trace of Zeb and Gunnar. The Mississippi River, once a witness to their joyous hunts, became the backdrop for a poignant quest for closure and remembrance. The story weaves through the emotional struggles of the fathers, the beauty of the river that claimed their sons, and the enduring connection between the families and the mighty Mississippi. The river, which took away 2 young lives, transformed into a place of reflection and remembrance for those left behind. As Med Palmer drove thousands of miles with Gunnar's dog Ranger by his side, he reflected on the irony of finding peace in the same river that stole his son away. The river, with its calm beauty and unforgiving currents, became a canvas for the fathers to paint their memories and seek closure. Up until this day, Zeb and Gunnar were never found.
On October 15, 2004, Jeremy Ivan Childress went on an annual elk hunting trip with a co-worker, Shane Louie, and Louie's young son, Shane Jr. Their destination? The Tillamook Forest in Oregon, a place well known as a great spot for hunters. Things took a turn for the worse not long after they set off. Somewhere along the way, they took a wrong turn and lost sight of where they held camp. The trio backtracked, hoping to stumble upon some familiar sight, but the dense forest seemed to swallow up any sign of their campsite. As they went deeper into the woods, Louie's young son grew increasingly scared. This prompted Louie to give up on the search and head back to the truck with his son. However, Childress, who was a far better hunter with years of experience navigating the wilderness, wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. Leaving his co-worker and his son behind, he ventured off alone with a promise to come back for them once he found the camp. Little did they know, this goodbye would be their last. Childress never returned as promised. On October 18th, a logger found the Louis and had to lead them out of the woods, since Childress was the only one who knew his way around. Childress's disappearance was quickly reported to the right authorities. Seeing the seriousness of the case, they swung into action, organizing a search for him. Over 300 people eventually joined the search. Despite the area where Childress vanished being filled with many dangers, such as wild animals and gullies, they were determined to find him. For a whole week, the authorities and volunteers searched the area with dog teams, helicopters, and all-terrain vehicles. But all they found was a single gum wrapper, the kind Childress liked to chew. They did find an empty campsite a mile and a half from where he went missing, but that was it. Childress's rifle and his pack of cigarettes, which he took along prior to venturing into the woods, were never recovered, nor did they find him dead or alive. Even though things looked grim, Childress's loved ones still did not give up. On some occasions, hunters went missing, and most of the time they turned up okay. They hoped this was also going to be the case for Childress. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear he wasn't coming back. It took a long time, all the way until 2006, before a death certificate was obtained for Childress. While it acknowledged that he was deceased, his loved ones are still yet to find closure.